Thank you so much for having me. I'm so humbled to be here, and I'm so grateful. And I'm so excited because I feel like in this moment in the California community colleges, we're doing so much work on structural changes. And I think it's welcome, it needed change. A lot of the conversations we're having 10 years ago, we would have, if you could show us, the conversations that we're having today and the language that we're using and the way that we've shifted our language, if you could show us that 10 years ago, so many of us would be jumping for joy. So, it's wonderful, the place that we're at and all of this work. But I also feel like a lot of times it's hard for us to focus on what's happening in the classroom, because we are working so hard on these massive structural changes. And so I'm just really excited to get to share with you my take on that. I also just am super excited to always share my take on anything with anybody. Like when my son asks me a question and I start to answer him, then he's like, oh, hang on, how long is it gonna take? And I'm like, I'm guessing like 3 to 5 minutes. He's like, that's okay, I don't need to know. So anyway, I want to talk to you about the other e-learning. And I don't mean using social media and tech tools for teaching, although I do want to talk about that stuff. I want to talk about empathy. And I just want to make a really kind of old-fashioned academic argument. And I think that sometimes this might be a bit of a lost art, which is something else that I want to get to. So I just want to make this claim and then back it up with sources that student engagement, there goes my water bottle, is the key to educational equity. That's what happens when you gesture a lot. And empathy is the key to engagement. And that, so if we can talk about this ooey gooey fuzzy thing, this idea about empathy, we're gonna get to equity. And actually we have to. This is absolutely a capacity that we have to grow. And there are things that we can do as practitioners and as educators to get better at this. So oppression relies upon dehumanization, period. So this is not like a new idea. We know this, and we don't have to look very far in our culture to see examples of that. We see how polarized we are. We see how we have news and fake news, and then we have massive confusion. But what we have are echo chambers where we self-reinforce, and we have a situation where now, in the 1950s, if you asked a parent, do you care, if your daughter marries a Republican or a Democrat? Very few people cared, like 10% of people cared. The vast majority did not care. They cared about other characteristics. Today, it's flipped. If whatever political party you belong to, if you think about your son or daughter marrying somebody of the other party, it's like crisis. Oh, we lost him, So anyway, I think empathy is something we're getting really bad at, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, all right. So I want to begin with a quote from Michael Wesch, who's a really talented educator, and you may not, if you don't recognize the name Michael Wesch, you might remember this image from one of his first videos that he put out. And it was called A Vision of Students Today, and the camera kind of panned around a lecture hall. Is it okay? Should I stop? Should I keep going?
Car got hit.
Oh. She's gonna take care of business. So Michael Wesch is a cultural anthropologist at Kansas State University, and he's a very talented educator. He's done TED Talks, and he put out this YouTube video way back, 10, 15 years ago, when we were not putting out YouTube videos as college educators. It just wasn't being done. And he just kind of, as an anthropologist, he handed, camcorders to his students and had them take pictures of each other, take video of each other, interview each other, and talk about what it's like for them to be students today. And it went viral. And so he got a lot of exposure from that. And he does a lot of speaking engagements. And and so people really rely on him as an expert about teaching and learning, effective teaching and learning. And one of the things about Michael Wesch that's really interesting is that at the beginning, he saw social media tools as really, really important to kind of bridging the gap between where we want to be and where we are now. He saw them as so full of potential. And then, because he uses a lot of those in his class in really innovative ways, and he's an amazing educator, and he has amazing results. Well, he's traveling around the country all the time giving talks, he's being invited to visit a lot of classrooms, he's seeing a lot of classrooms, and he's finding that actually social media tools are not necessarily helpful. They might help, they might hurt. And he's looking at a lot of different, so then he's like, okay, well, what is it? What is the thing? What is at the heart of a classroom that's actually transforming lives versus this kind of like, Bueller, anyone, is this gonna be on the test? He's like, a good question should lead you on a quest, and I hear like the worst questions around. And so at a certain point, after he had been kind of tinkering with his own teaching and with his understanding of great teaching in general, he decided, it comes down to empathy. So he wrote a blog, and he just wrote this as an anecdotal, so he didn't back it up with research, but I have his claim for you here. He's looking at classes that, so he might go into a class where someone straight up lectures, and it's phenomenal. That's how he teaches, I think, in many ways. It's amazing, the connection, what's happening for students. And then he might go into a classroom where everything's been set up using every best practice there is. Like really careful setup, and it is not happening. There's no spark, there's nothing, there's no connection, there's no engagement. And so he decided it's empathy, that's the key. If there's no authentic encounter with the students, no, I don't think that's it. It's just like, it's too simple. It's not that. And, I don't think it's that. Here's what I do. That's what we love to do. That's what we professors love to do. We love to hear what someone else is saying, and we're waiting for our turn. And then we're like, well, let me tell you what I do in my class, But I think he's right. I think it is all about empathy. And so what I want to do is back up his claims with some other sources. But the thing is, and the reason why it's hard for us to see that, and especially see something so simple, is that expertise is in itself a barrier to empathy. How messed up is that? We spend years developing our expertise, and then it makes us actually less able to connect with anybody who's not an inside member of that group. I'm a literary critic by training. That's terrible, You're no longer suited for life with other people after all that years of literally being trained to criticize. Don't watch a movie with us. I mean, happily I married another literary critic, so we're okay. Well, actually, no, anyway. So I want to talk about this because this is a big deal for us, the expert blind spot. And there's been research done about this. Sheila Tobias wrote a really influential article, I think it was in the late 70s, about expert blind spot. And lots of people have written about this, but I'll just give you an anecdote. I was skiing a few years ago, which is not something that I do. I'm from a family that immigrated after World War II and had a really tough time, and it was rather miserable. And in their new home country. And the idea of getting up on a mountain and putting sticks on your legs and then pushing yourself off is just like, we survived the camps for this, it's like, no, you're not spending money to do that. So, but I'm sitting here and I'm trying to be part of the middle class that we've worked so hard to be in, and we're with another family, and I have a son, and I'm like, well, I have to model for him. I don't know why I didn't think to go take a lesson. That also would have been good modeling for him, but I guess because it costs money, and at this point I'm like already shelling out $400 and hearing my grandmother criticize me, so I just like go on that bunny slope and just kind of like terrifiedly, slide down over and over again. And I just spent my day doing that because everybody else was skiing, and my son was having his lesson and whatever, and working his way further into the middle class, which is what we're trying to do. And he needs to know how to ski. So at a certain point, right? This is an important competency for him. So at tennis too, it's like, oh, you better get that kid a racket. Oh boy, golf is next, I guess. So I'm just, I'm not enjoying myself, but I'm just thinking about all these things and issues, and I'm just kind of like gruelingly going up that hill and coming down and trying to make it different every time. But I'm basically just snow plowing. And then at a certain point, this elderly man who I had seen on the slope all day long, he just like skied right in front of me and cut me off, like, and he was like, I can't take it anymore. you know, and I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, you're not skiing, you're just sliding down the mountain. And I'm like, yes, and trying not to die, you know? And so he's like, well, I'm gonna give you a lesson because this is ridiculous, you know? And I'm like, great, knock yourself out. So he proceeded to tell me, you know, like, stand like this, and I did that, and he's like, you know, okay, and then you need your poles like this, and I did that. And I was actually pretty happy about it, because I was like, maybe I'm gonna learn something. And then he's like, okay, now, your knees are attached to your ankles by a coil. And he starts doing this motion, and I'm like trying to do the motion. And then he's looking at me, and he's just like, well, you're hopeless. And then he skis down the mountain. So my point is, knowing how to do something really well does not mean you know how to teach, okay? Knowing how to do something really well does not mean that you know how to teach about it. And so that expertise is actually a barrier, because you don't, how hard it is for us to recover the point of view of being a novice and then be able to go from there and go forward from there. So this is one of the major reasons why our students struggle when they get to us. Because all of us, you know, school is a comfort zone for us. We're educators. But it's this whole discourse community, in addition to all the other kinds of community that it is. We have our ways of talking. We have our ways of doing. Lindsay mentioned office hours and knowing what that is. Years ago in the LA Community College District, they did a survey to try to figure out, why aren't students using office hours? And they found out that a significant number of students thought that if it said office hours, that meant, do not disturb me during these times. This is my office time. So then they just, you know, then you decide what to do from there. Do you change the name? Do you call it drop-in hours? Or do you just simply, you know, go over the syllabus in a more careful way? But there's a preponderance of expert blind spots that we can have, starting from just this sort of customer service and the, you know, beginning ways of getting onto campus, all the way down to disciplinary learning, you know, in transfer level courses. And so a lot of times the students are sort of primed to feel like they're wrong and they're the only ones in the room that don't get it. But of course, we know that that's not true. And the other thing about the discourse mismatch that a lot of scholars have written about is that this is really, really emotionally charged stuff. So it's not just an academic thing. It's not just like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that that was, you know, the lingo that we're using, but now I've got it. This is like, okay, here's this community, I'm outside, I'm gonna try to work my way in, or am I? Am I? What am I gonna give up? You know, what am I gonna lose, what am I gonna gain? What am I gonna lose and what am I gonna gain? You know, I have to go back to 20 years ago, going home with my now still wife and telling her Italian-American parents that we're gay. And it's like, first thing, is that what they teach you up at college? Yes, actually, kind of, yes. Sorry about that. I was a women's studies major, so yes. The world opened up for us. Possibilities opened up for us. We found the courage to figure out who we were. We made that leap, you know? But the alienation that your friends and family might feel as you're transferring to this different, and so there are many manifestations of that. You know, there are a million ways to come home for Thanksgiving and hear somebody say, oh, Miss Thang, who do you think you are? So, you know, we have to keep in mind that this is not just a straightforward, you know, decision that students are making to go ahead and come into, quote unquote, our way of being and our way of doing things. They're navigating a lot and they're making intelligent decisions, and sometimes they can see, I don't see what's in this for me. You know, so if you're going to have to psychologically or psychically disengage from your support system, it might not be worth it. Or if you can sense that alienation that you are in right now in that classroom, why would you give up anything? So, I mean, I love James Baldwin's article from the 70s, if Black English isn't a language, then tell me what is. He says, a child cannot be taught by anyone who despises him, and a child cannot afford to be fooled. We will protect ourselves. We will survive. We are not going to simply submit to racism. Just the other day, and I was in my Professor Wood's class, the Black Minds Matter open course that I'm participating in, and Patrice Cullors was being interviewed, and she said something very related. Spaces of care, our schools, spaces of care have been turned into spaces of criminalization. And Professor Wood, later in that lecture for that course, I heard him say, and I said, I gotta put this in my slide. You cannot teach, you cannot counsel, you cannot advise someone that you fear, because it will mar all the micro-level reactions that you have with them. So our students are navigating this discourse mismatch and the system where they know that they have been placed outside and alienated. And this possible cultural conflict, resistance or disengagement from what's going on in the classroom is in many cases a perfectly appropriate reaction and a perfectly intelligent. So what do we do? So this is where I want to get back to the research supporting Wesch's claim that empathy is at the key to all powerful teaching and learning experiences. Thank you, because I really want to know this stuff, but I'm never going to make it through all of that. And he does so much in his book, How Children Succeed, Grit, Curiosity, and the Hidden Power of Character. He does so much about attachment theory and how it comes down to making that. So we know that we have the fight or flight response. We know that when we are feeling that sense of panic, fear, pain, or shame, kind of the higher level critical thinking shuts down, and we know that. So that's his quote: the stress response system is highly complex, but it's as subtle as a croquet mallet, just like done, I'm out of here. Or when you're hungry, as Professor Wood said, you can't think. You can survive, you can do it, but you can't think because you're hungry. So in this book, he makes this case that we've been looking in the wrong places in so many cases. With good intentions, we've been looking at academic achievement, and we've been trying to get to kids earlier and just shove letters and numbers down their little baby throats. It's like, we got to get these kids more literacy experiences earlier on, and this kind of obsession. Or my sister was in the park, and there was a woman holding a baby, and she was like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like something out of The Handmaid's Tale. I was like, I don't know. Anyway, he said, well, I guess it's not creepy as long as it's loving attachment, because that's what's key. The key to future success, and the key to that, that grit that everybody's always looking for. It's attachment. It's having people that you have a secure attachment to. It's not this idea about IQ. Here's another study, I'm just showing an image of it, that my colleague who runs the growth mindset community of practice for 3CSN, which I forgot to introduce, but I'll explain it later, told me about. There was a study done about teachers having a very low cost, very minor intervention, just learning a little bit about how to respond to disciplinary issues in class with empathy rather than punitively, cut suspension rates in half. And the thing about this is that they only talked to the math teachers at the school. They didn't deal with anybody else. So they took only math teachers. They gave them a super cheap little online module to learn about. And based on that tiny intervention, school-wide, suspension rates were cut in half. So what we can take from that is it just takes the one teacher. Fernando's Miss Shumi or Janet's Ms. Rivera. It just takes the one person to connect, one person to respond differently, one person to hear and say, oh, respond with empathy. Like we would do as parents. Like, or what we try to do, I should say what we aspire to do as parents. Not, what the hell is wrong with you? But I'm curious as to why you're making that choice. Tell me what you're thinking about right now. You know, if we can just slow it down, you know, sometimes the defiance. So I'll give a cute example. My little son, oh my goodness. He has some aunties in Portland and they're always writing him little letters. And he got his school pictures. So we're like, okay, well you need to send your aunties a school picture. And he's famous for, you know, yeah, he's not listening to me. He and nobody else in my life listens to me when I talk. So anyway, so he sits down and he writes his whole note to his aunties and then he seals it up in his little special, you know, stationery that has squirrels on it and puts a stamp on it, and he didn't put the picture in. So we're like, hello, this whole thing was to send them a picture. And then my wife gets all into this, you know what? They send you gifts, they send you cards, you send them a picture, that's how it works. This is the exchange, open it up, you know, because he doesn't want to open it because it's going to tear his little squirrel stationery. You open that up and you put a picture there. He's like, no. Anyway, so he's being defiant. And it's like, why? You know, and you the things that run through your head, it's like, oh, I see. Oh, it's on. You know, it's like, oh, okay, who's gonna win? I say do it, you say no. Well, blah, blah, blah. You know, and then one of us had the, you know, forbearance to say, why do you not want to send the picture? And this little boy says, I didn't mention anything about including a picture in the letter. How freaking cute is that? You know? Oh, he has his reasons. He has his reasons. So then we were able to say, oh, okay, well, you can send them another letter later. But how hard is it to stop and ask? And so this, I mean, it goes back to the bias. It goes back to the bias that our colleagues have been talking to us about all day, because if you already coming into the situation with a little bit of fear, like, oh, I don't know if this student, I don't know if I can handle this or whatever, this little bit of assumption, like you don't really care or whatever, and all of that negativity, it may make you less likely to just ask. But why? Why didn't you bring your paper today? Or why did you say that in that way? Just ask. Okay, so another of the sources that I want to bring in to defend Michael Wesch's claim is from Brene Brown in her book, Daring Greatly, How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead. And she claims that the secret killer she says that killer of innovation, because she's talking about development and new ideas, but I just put in learning because I think it's a very similar process. It's shame. You know, every time somebody doesn't raise their hand, every time somebody doesn't engage or give it a try, you know, chances are that they are ashamed or they're afraid of being shamed, and they would rather hold back and not try than to take the risk that it takes to put yourself out there and move forward. So I wanted to show a little video clip, and I'll just get down there. And this is from something called Reading Between the Lives. And it was a video made with all students and one faculty advisor at Chabot College about 12 years ago. And this is just a little bit of inquiry research where the students went around and asked each other about reading. And do you do the reading, and how does it go, and whatever. So this goes with the clip about shame. I just want to, it's about 1 minute, yeah. So there's a little, oopsie. If you go back, yeah, exactly, there's a little play button there. Thank you.
Yeah, the question, you better ask something very, intelligent to the yes, it's most likely either all the students are laughing at you or the teacher makes you feel like you're pretty, inferior. You should have read that, or you should have known that can isolate, they say that, that's racist stuff, If I don't know something, I feel like, maybe I'm stopping to go.
Is that what happened in your other classes? Yeah, I did. And then, it's so really awkward. Because love from the understanding, you're being lazy and you're not taking the time to.
So one of the most powerful quotes in that short video is of a student talking about how, I go to my teacher and I tell her I don't understand the assignment, and then the teacher just says, "It's easy, you can do it." And I've done that. Another student talks about how, well, I would approach the teacher, but they just look so busy. She's got her books piled up to here, and she's running, and paper flying everywhere, and clearly, and they're taking care of us a lot of times. They see us and what we put out as being so harried. So we're trying to, you can do it, don't worry, you're fine, it's gonna be fine, but we're not stopping to actually ask or listen and hear. So learners have to trust educators for learning to occur. Contact is more important than content. That's one of my main points that I want to make. I feel like it's the quality of the contact and the connection that's in the classroom. And we can call that empathy, or we can try to call it something else, but that's what's more important. And a lot of times, I have the privilege of getting to work with a lot of educators in professional learning setting, and people are just worried about getting through the content, quote unquote. We gotta get through the content, we gotta get through the content. But if you don't make those connections, it doesn't stick, it doesn't matter. So it really has to take primacy. And so I like to say empathy is the highest level critical thinking skill. So if you want to say that I'm like woo-woo, foo-foo, I don't think so. I want to say back to you, this is really hard. This is really hard. Do you think this is not hard intellectual work in addition to emotional work to try to connect with people to such a level, because it requires a kind of a reciprocal vulnerability. You need to put yourself out there to some extent and put yourself on offer, but not go too far, because we've all had that teacher, who's telling you about their life and it's starting to make you uncomfortable. And then you also, you need the students to also, this is hard. This is hard professional work. So this quote from Toni Morrison is something that I have been wrestling with for more than 20 years. She wrote her first novel, The Bluest Eye. She needed to write a novel that, the novel she wanted to read, she had to write it. It wasn't out there. So she wrote this novel about a young African-American girl who was ostracized by her community and sort of used as a kind of a psychic dumping ground for the community, but obviously within the context of institutional racism. And so 20 years after its publication, I think it's a wonderful book. I think it's a beautiful book. I love that book. She wrote in the afterword, it didn't work. So she's like, I was trying to do this, I was trying to do that, I was trying to do this, I was trying to do that. Many readers remained touched but not moved. And I was like, what does that mean? What does it mean? What's the difference? What does it mean to be moved? And you kind of know what she means, but how do you codify that? And I have a personal history with this book because I have a really vivid memory of being a young girl walking into my mom's bedroom and finding her sobbing and clutching this book. And I could see the cover of the book, and I was asking her what was wrong, and she sort of told me a little bit about the book. But I could see, as a kid, that she really connected with that book, and that something about it touched her and was about her, and it mattered to her. She connected with that book more so than possibly the average reader. And I was putting together at that time, my mom had been severely abused by her parents. And of course they can blame the Holocaust, so it just kind of goes and goes. I have plenty of things to say about her in therapy, but we all do our best. We keep going. But I just wonder, so she connected with that book, passionately. It touched her. I think it moved her, but did it move her the way Toni Morrison wanted that book to move a white lady? I don't know, I don't know. How do we know that? How do we know? I think I know, because I wrote my dissertation about Toni Morrison, and I sat down and I read every word that woman ever wrote. I feel like I understand what she's trying to do. I feel like she's trying to reach inside and shake loose what we have, the way we're built by the society and the way that we're socialized, with racism, I feel like her novels are trying to intervene in that. But yet, as a graduate student teaching courses, and my first sort of career path was teaching multi-ethnic literatures of the United States, and I had the privilege to teach a bunch of undergraduate courses that were quote unquote diversity requirement courses. And you know, it's tough. It's tough to teach works like this that are so impactful and have students sort of do, meh, yeah, it's not about me. You know, it's not of interest to me. That's not for me. This is not for me. That was kind of like and so it's like, okay, how do you not just touch people, but how do you actually move them? What does that look like? So that's where we get to this interest in empathy. How do you actually develop empathy as a critical capacity? If this is like a habit of mind and we can all learn and we can all get better, how do we do it? How do we get better at it? And how do we teach it? And how do we do so in an ethical way? Because one of the things that I would come up against when I was teaching these quote unquote diversity requirement courses is that just by nature of that designation being on a course, students are coming in knowing that this course is supposed to make me a better person, you know, better than I was. And there's this sort of and it's true, you know, it is true. It's like we need to make this a requirement so that everybody takes at least some kind of a course that gets them exploring diversity. But then at the same time, obviously, just the very setup is kind of counter to internalized motivation for exploring things that might make you uncomfortable. And so, you know, as an educator, I felt like, you know, a range of responsibilities to try to push the students in the class past their comfort level, to really grapple, to get towards some kind of movement that Toni Morrison might approve of. That's my, you know, she's sort of like up here looking at me. Does Toni Morrison approve? Probably not yet. You know, keep working, keep working. Could I present myself to Toni Morrison and have her be like, I'm glad to meet you? Probably not yet. I don't think she would care to meet me yet, so keep working. But, you know, how do I do that? How do I push without making the people in the class who are occupying various diverse subject positions, which I may or may not know about, without making them feel so uncomfortable? You know, so I give an example. I was teaching a literary course at Pasadena City College. And we were doing a play, and you know, it was an older play, and you know, a character gets raped, but it's subtly described. So all of the students missed it. You know, they didn't really get what happened. It was just one of these, like when we were reading Thomas Hardy when I was in high school, and then they laid down at the foot of the tree, and my English teacher was like, and we were like, big deal, they laid down at the foot of a tree, and why did they even do that? You know, she was like, they had sex, oh my God, you know, so like that, like we didn't get it, you know. So I was working with my students on this play, and this is really upsetting, you know, thing that happens. Of course, it was acted out in front of you, you get the picture. But we were reading, and so anyway, you know, we were kind of going back and forth in terms of a deep textual analysis, and I was trying to let it happen. I wasn't telling them, I was letting it emerge from them, which means it happened more powerfully, and it did, and it kind of hit the room like an infection, like what had really happened. And then, you know, we had a discussion, it was really powerful, and I lost a student. She left. She didn't come back after the break. She came to see me in my office. She said, you know, I was a straight A student. 4 years ago, I was raped, and I just can't get my life back on track. And I love this class. I'm coming back. I need to take a break for a minute. She couldn't come back in my classroom after that. You know, she could. It was powerful teaching. But oh golly, stop that! I lost her. I couldn't predict it. So we don't know, this is hard. We don't necessarily know what we're doing. You know, humility is required. We're trying to make ourselves available. We try to ask them to make themselves available, but what's gonna happen, you know? So this guy had a bunch of work come out, and I'll just skip this one. And one of the easiest things to sort of Google is 6 habits of highly empathetic people, you know, and we love our 6 habits of that and our 5 characteristics of that. And, you know, so he had about 5 years ago this really nice, robust, kind of catchy body of work going on about empathy as a critical habit of mind and how can we develop it, you know, how can we get better at it. And so these are his 6. Cultivating curiosity about strangers, challenge prejudices, discover commonalities, try another person's life. Now that sounds like, I tell you, Michael Wesch, that talented educator that I began with, this guy, he's so innovative and confident. So he has his students at Kansas State in his anthropology classes, and they probably have to sign a waiver when they sign up, but you know, he's got these big lecture classes, and he has them kind of fill out a questionnaire about who they are. And so he'll have some Trump supporters, and he'll have some Hillary diehards or Bernies. You know, he'll have, you know, very conservative Christians and also people, you know, on the other end of the spectrum, and he will match them up based on lack of commonality. And their assignment is to go have dinner with each other's families and shadow each other, take turns shadowing each other and spending a ton of time together. And then they reflect on it or whatever. Okay, that's very powerful. That's amazing. That's a great assignment. You might be teaching community college chemistry and thinking, that is not available to me. You know, like I can't do that. A lot of us might look at a lot of this stuff and look at what our jobs are on campus, either what we're teaching or where we're working, and we're thinking, okay, well, I don't know how, you know, that exactly is going to fit in. So here's where I want to get to my real argument, because I think that we have everything that we need right now to intervene in the way things are. I think we have everything that we need. We just need to get to be reading more. I think that we need to actually read. We, as professionals, often have things that we want to read. We all distribute them. We buy copies for each other. We bring them to meetings. They are our prop. Nobody read that, okay? Then we talk about the president or whatever else we were going to talk about. Our students, they buy textbooks a lot of times. It's just a paperweight in the backpack. Either the course is not referring to the book at all, or not working with it at all, or the students are not able to make meaning of what it is that they're trying to be reading. And so I want to make an argument that by intervening here, having text-based conversations, that's what we do. That's what we bring. And our society needs that more than ever. And the problem is, we think we got that. So this is this thing where it's very strange. So I have the great privilege to facilitate professional development. And I've done lots and lots of workshops all over. And the introductory workshop that I do for an approach that is called Reading Apprenticeship, which I'll describe in a minute, you know, we just do a lot of work in the morning, sort of reflecting on our own literacy histories and then thinking about what do we do as readers, you know, working with a complex text and then uncovering all the stuff we do that's automated and we don't notice it. We try to pull that out and notice it and start making a chart for that. And it's really intense. You know, when people reflect back on their own literacy histories, we all have our successes and we all have our failures. We all have humbling moments. We all have had times where we're in that class and we're like, everybody gets this but me. You know, we all have a book that we sat there and read, cover to cover, quote unquote read, and had no idea what it was, and you know, put that on ourselves and felt a lot of shame about. So always at any one-day workshop, no matter where I am, room full of educators, at the break, somebody will come up to me and say, well, that was tough for me because I'm a slow reader. And then, you know, we'll have a conversation or whatever, and they'll leave, and then I'm on my way to the bathroom, and then somebody else is like, that was really interesting. I tell you, that exercise was tough for me because I'm a slow reader, you know. So, I mean, like, I'll have like 25 of these conversations through the course of the day where people are just letting me know privately, like, you know what, whew, boy, for me, that was hard because I'm a slow reader, you know, not like everybody else. So all college level educators are apparently slow readers, or maybe, reading is just slower than we think it's supposed to be. Maybe we think it's supposed to happen like instantaneously and we've got perfect comprehension, and that's simply not true. At the same time, I have a young child, and it's just so crazy, like, you're in the kindergarten room and every parent is like, oh, isn't it difficult to find good books for your advanced reader? So it's like everywhere you go, go to the bathroom there on parent night. Well, my son is an advanced reader, so, So I'm like, okay, so I'm putting this together and I'm like, all children are advanced readers, according to their parents, and all adults, educated professionals are slow readers, according to ourselves and our self-critique. So we have this weird thing in our culture where we're trying to know already. So your 5-year-old's got it. Your 5-year-old is perfect and super accelerated reader, job well done, awesome. You taught them to ride a bike, you taught them to read, you're good, they're set. And this is like this, why do we feel like we're supposed to already know? So I have a picture of baseball up here because, my poor kid is trying to play baseball in Little League. Oh my goodness, I didn't know. We showed up there when he's 5 years old for T-ball tryouts. Skills assessment. Sorry, the kid's got 2 moms. What do you want? So he's just in his like little clothes. We get there. All these kids are in full Dodger paraphernalia, head to toe, even the shoes. Holy smokes, okay. Didn't know about that. And then I'm like, oh, honey, look, there's first base. And my wife's like, that's home. Shh, stop talking. And I'm like, okay, all right. Well, sweetheart, you just go to the bullpen and hang out and listen to the coaches. And my wife's like, there's no bullpen in Little League. It's a dugout. She's like, you, stop talking. No more, And so he gets up there. He doesn't even know he's supposed to like hit the ball. And then he just stands there. And I'm like, run, baby, run! And she's like, I told you, stop talking. And at that point, he too was like, so anyway, so my kid, now this is what's considered in our, because we are trying to get him upwardly middle class, need to learn how to ski, need to learn how to play tennis. Oh, he's at a deficit because he's 5 and he doesn't know yet how to play T-ball. And it continues, let me tell you, he is 9 now. It's hard. It's hard. I don't know what it is. I know that a lot of the kids, they have a parent who's out there throwing with them every day, out there teaching them how to throw the ball, how to catch the ball, how to hit the ball, time on task and all of that. But, he was supposed to show up already knowing how to play. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to continue to show up. To continue to show up, you stand up there, it's just you, right? I am blown away by the amount of courage that he has. Or maybe it's not that he has that much courage. Maybe it's just that he's like, I'm fine, and it's the rest of us who are nuts. But I tell you, he's not good, and it's really hard, right? It's hard to, quote unquote, catch up, And he's 9, and I'm like, you know what? So he's had coaches, like his coaches right now in fall ball, they don't know his name. I emailed the coach and I said, oh, I gotta let you know, I'm sorry for the short notice, we're not gonna be there for the game. Marco's got a birthday party or whatever, and he writes back, he's like, no problem, Paul already told us. I'm like, yeah, that would be Carlo's dad. I'm trying to tell you about Marco, but whatever, They don't know, and that's fine. They're doing a volunteer job, and it's only fall ball or whatever. But there's no like sociable sense with the kids. There's no sense of being part of something. There's no teaching. So you just get up there and take those strikes and try your best, and hope that your own team doesn't heckle you. And contrast this with, he did have an experience with a different team where he had coaches who actually had invested themselves as teachers. So again, this is the expert blind spot thing. My son right now has a coach who actually played in Major League Baseball for a decade. Okay, don't say anything negative. That's not the best coaching experience that we've ever had, So that deep expertise does not necessarily translate into helping 8 and 9-year-olds play ball. Whereas this other coach that he had, they actually taught the kids how to cheer for each other. Because the kids, I mean, you know, they're going to sit there and they're waiting for each other to get done batting, and they just kind of say, like, wow, you're really bad, you know? And, oh, come on, would you hit the ball so it can be my turn? You know, I mean, that's where they are, and that's what they say. But when the coach said to them, no, that's not what we say. What we say is, let's go. Or they taught them what to do with themselves, you know, when they're sitting in the dugout, not bullpen, you know, when they're sitting in the dugout and they're waiting for their turn and they're bored, what do? They say, 3 and 2, what you gonna do, or whatever. And they taught them how to do that, in addition to teaching them how to actually play the game. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that we have this culture where somehow, as kids, we feel like we're all trying to get our kid super competent super early, and it's like you're supposed to already know. You don't show up there and show the vulnerability of learning. You don't sit up there and you fail and learn from it and fail and learn from it. That is not encouraged. Kids are washed out. You know, so what I'm trying to say is that every game has its practices that we could do a better job apprenticing people into so that they can stay in the game long enough to get good. There's no way my kid would suck forever. If he sticks with it, he's going to get better, you know? But I don't know. I mean, I don't care if he plays or not. But it's hard to see why you would stick with something like that when the setup is as it is. If you're not like already marvelously talented at it and you're not getting, you know, and all you get is this kind of like yucky negative feedback. So obviously, I want to connect that to our students. You know, I want to connect that to the fact that reading and having text-based conversations and writing about reading and having conversations with other people and other scholars, that's what we do. That's our game. That's what we all do. You know, we all have this capacity, and if we don't introduce the students to it and help them and apprentice them into it, and this is how we do this piece, then it's not fair. It's not fair. It's requiring way too much of them to stay in the game and somehow try to pick up these capacities that we could easily, actually we are there to teach them how to do it. This is more challenging than ever. I am not of the opinion necessarily that like, oh, the internet is making us dumb. I don't think that. I don't think like video games are melting our brains. I don't. I think that video games like work one part of the brain, you know, and that there's nothing wrong with that. Like with everything, you know, balance is needed. But there is something about distraction right now. And that's what this quote is about. Very ironically, this man wrote a book, The Lost Art of Reading. I thought, oh, that book sounds so good. It is really good. Guess what? I was trying to read it. I was so distracted. It was killing me, you know, and I was like, this is crazy, you know. I mean, the amount of shenanigans that we need to do to try to disconnect ourselves from our devices, you know. There are actually products out there that you can purchase that will take you offline, and that if you need to get back online, you're gonna have to pay $20. Like, this is something people do, you know? This man, Alex Pang, has this book called The Distraction Addiction, and he went and studied Buddhist monks who are actually prolific bloggers, and he's like, how do they get so much done? And it's because they like turn it off, meditate, and then they turn it on and they do their writing or whatever. And anyway, so we are really kind of adrift, and so the idea of being able to focus and do academic reading and thinking and discussion, we absolutely can do it. We all have the capacity, and so do our students. There's no problem. I do think we just have to be more intentional in terms of setting the stage for that and really valuing that and really modeling that. So this quote is from somebody who is an educator in Texas, and she wrote a book called The Book Whisperer. And what happened to her is that she was doing like the regular reading curriculum at the school, which is like nonsense, you know, weird worksheets and business about reading, somehow building up your reading capacity through like dumb stuff, I'm sorry. Like, you know, read this passage and then answer this question, and anyway, she noticed that her students, her strongest students, her best readers in the class, were like rushing through the worksheets so that they could secretly read their real book under the table. And she's like, this is perverse, you know? Like, what? Here they are having to be in the closet about being readers, you know? And so she flipped the classroom dynamic, and she had a teacher, a principal rather, who allowed her to do this. And so she just built a huge library in her class. She's got an encyclopedic knowledge of young adult fiction, which helps a lot. And what they do, they don't do any of that worksheet stuff, they just read. And she teaches them the practices that authentic readers use. For example, we pick up a book, we think we're gonna like it. It's not happening. We leave it on the bedside table, it collects dust. We pick up another book. We all do this, you know? We allow ourselves the capacity to do this. Well, students don't know that. You know, kids don't necessarily know that if we don't model that for them. And I noticed after reading her book, I was like, how do I model reading for my son? He never sees me read. He sees me Ubering him around to all of his junk that I've been haranguing you people about. You know, reading for me is in bed at night, you know, before I conk out. So it's like, no, they need to see our reading practices and participate in them. So she encourages students, if a book is not catching, oh, you dump that book, break up with it, it's over, forget it, back on the shelf, you find another book that you're actually going to be able to read, and helps them develop, you know, their interests and figure out what they like to read, their genres and topics, and just gets them reading. And then, of course, no surprise, her class, which is doing none of the standard curriculum to support their literacy skills, they're off the charts. So she modeled reading and showed her students that it was engaging, and so they did it. So I have this great luck to work for an organization called 3CSN, California Community College Success Network. And some of you might be familiar with it. And there are lots of regional networks and communities of practice within 3CSN. And I always like to say, you know, we're all just touching a different part of the elephant, you know? So one of my communities of practice is the Reading Apprenticeship Project, and we're really trying to zero in on critical academic literacies. And I'm trying to support teachers no matter what you teach, whether you're teaching welding or whether you're teaching English like me. How do we support the students reading in that disciplinary area? Because I have to tell you the truth. My students come back to me with their nursing book, and they're like, I need your help. I don't know how to read all this and be ready for the quiz. And I look at that, I don't know either. I don't know what to do with that thing other than reps, because I could really get buff with it. You know, I mean, it's just huge. I don't know. I don't have the strategies. I don't have the expertise. I don't know how. I don't know. Disciplinary experts have massive amounts of knowledge about how this is done within the discipline. What are the questions that the discipline asks? What are the kinds of problems that the discipline is interested in trying to solve? You know, we don't know this. So English teachers cannot help that much. You know, we can do our lane, but when it comes to chemistry or physics or bio, we really need those educators to be thinking about, okay, what does it mean to read or write or pose problems in this discipline? So that's one of my communities of practice. There are other 3CSN communities of practice, such as the Habits of Mind community of practice or acceleration. And so as I was saying, if you just think about this, you know, the huge reform effort that we're doing as this big elephant, you know, like I got the tail, you're touching the foot, you know, you're over here tickling the belly. I mean, they're all related. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at is that, you know, I'm not really trying to do a sales pitch for this community of practice. I just want to give an example about how professional learning can really be one of the ways that we can feel like we're building our capacity as equity-minded practitioners. You know, we can do this. We can help. And I would actually say we have to, because the way our culture is going right now with to not have critical information literacy as a populace is actually a real crisis for our democracy. So, I mean, 10 years ago, I felt like we really needed to be able to source information and kind of trace it back and figure out where it's coming from. But today, I mean, it's like ridiculously off the charts, this need. They did a study, I forget who, several years ago. They took young people and old people. So like they took like 40-somethings and 20-somethings and gave them a question to answer, and you know, through using online sources. And the 20-somethings answered the question instantly, and the 40-somethings took longer. And so the first interpretation of that data was, oh, well, we're so slow, you know, they're so awesome at technology, they know just what to do. But then a closer look showed, that the 20-somethings, they just clicked that first sponsored link. The 40-somethings scrolled down a little bit, and cross-checked a couple things. So they asked them a dumb question like, did Hillary Clinton have plastic surgery? And they found that a younger generation was more likely to just look up the question, let it auto-complete, pick the first thing, and give you their answer. 10 seconds flat, but they haven't looked at where the information came from at all. So we have to be working on this as a society for the survival of our democracy. So this framework that I base my work in, I love working with a framework because it gives me something to work on. It gives me something to return to because it's humbling, hard, long-term work. It's not easy. It's nothing, no silver bullets about any of it. You're talking about trying to change how you teach. That's like trying to change how you parent. Like Lindsay said, you do what was done to you. So you read the book about attachment parenting and you realize it's all about the quality of the connection and it's all about how you respond to your child. But then you don't get a good night's sleep and that kid doesn't want Rice Krispies because we don't have the blue agave, we have the other agave, and you're like, do you know how lucky you are? Anyway, so it's, back it up, yeah. So we do what was done to us. We flip back into these well-worn paths. So I like having a framework that gives me things to return to and work on. So when I use this framework, I'm like, okay, if in my classroom I want to establish a really strong personal dimension, I need to know who my students are. I'm asking them to show themselves to me. I'm showing myself to them. That's that reciprocal vulnerability that I was talking about. I need to make sure that social dimension is safe. And we always say we want the classroom to be a safe space. And then, we also want learning to be deep and transformative, which is not safe. So, we're doing our best to create conditions where it's a reasonable gamble for people to really, truly bring themselves into the room. Cognitive dimension. Sit-ups and push-ups for your brain, people. Yeah, there's work to be done. We all have that work to be done. So if video gaming is building up one set of neural pathways, okay, awesome. Well, reading extensive academic text, that's building up another area. You can build it up really fast if you do it, but you do need to be held accountable for doing it, and we can just acknowledge it's work. It's hard work, lots of different kinds of problem solving that we can work on. And then there's the knowledge building dimension, which is all the stuff that we either would ideally know coming in and maybe don't know, all the stuff that we happen to know coming in, which may seem extraneous but might come in handy later, all the stuff that we're trying to teach our students. In the background of this, it says extensive reading, because I believe that we have been moving away from using reading in learning because we just feel like we can't count on the students to do the reading. So, we give it to them. We say, here's the reading, but, actually we are gonna do stuff for you. We are gonna give you information and, what is the assessment based on, or we're gonna, use PowerPoint and I'll give you the PowerPoint, you study that, or I'm gonna give you a study guide. Okay. And so, the other thing about this reading apprenticeship framework is that it's getting at trying to have metacognitive conversation. So we know from the scientific studies of how people learn that reflection and metacognition is really at the heart of learning, and that if you can do just that, if you can just be able to know, oh, shoot, I was reading but I lost it. Dang, I gotta go back. Hello, that's huge. That's a great start. There's a lot more that we can do than that. But just being able to say, I didn't get that, who did get that, and have that conversation about how you solved that problem. Okay, so I have to speed it up. So I was going to give two examples, one of a physics class, which I don't have time to really tell you about, but I certainly don't have time for the video, but I'll just tell you, so this approach that I'm talking about, it can change the situation across. I'm not just talking about like quote unquote basic skills. I'm not talking about English. I'm not talking about college skills. I'm talking about the physics instructor figuring out how to reconceptualize her role. Because the way she describes it, she loves physics. She's a nuclear astrophysicist who was doing this like amazing research in Europe, and then her life got derailed through an immigration issue. And 5, 6 years later, she lands in Los Angeles, and she's starting from scratch, and she becomes a community college educator. She's amazing, amazing, but her whole experience is, super brainy stuff. So she's like, physicists love old-fashioned chalkboard. So she's up there, and then she turns around and she's like, right? And of course the students are like, there's just no response to that. So now she sees herself, she understands that they're not with her up there on that chalkboard. She's facilitating their learning. So I have a video clip, but no time. Okay, and then this other example is the first year Pathways program at my college, and it's giant, it's a 2-scale program. This is a program where we have embedded this reading apprenticeship framework throughout, so it's a whole program. It starts with information sessions, a summer bridge, we have a first year seminar, and then we have college success coaches. And there's no time to talk about how, but this framework is embedded throughout. So we're working on this. We're working on trying to teach this way. And we're all sort of, I say, some people do yoga, I do this reading apprenticeship thing. I'm trying to figure it out, I'm trying to do it, working on it, Though this College One course, it's huge for us. We had to write the course. It's open access, so we don't discriminate based on the placement tests, which are terrible anyway. Happily, finally getting out the door. But it is a UC and CSU transferable 3-unit class. And so part of the class is a 1 book, 1 college. So many colleges have this program. It's a high impact practice to have a 1 book, 1 college. Guess what? They don't read the book, okay? Again, it's a prop. Everybody's got that book, they carry it around in their backpack. So we make it part of the course so that the faculty, like 80 faculty per semester, and the students, like 3,000 students, are reading the same book. And we have a speaker series that they're required to go to, a poster conference that they do, and lots of support. And so I just want to show a little bit of the results for that. And so we have rockin' data. We have amazing data of students who return. They stick with us. They come back for year 2 of college. They come back for year 3 of college. Way better in the program than out of the program. And it's the whole program, make no mistake. But if we didn't have that reading apprenticeship framework that we were working on trying to apprentice the students into the game of what we're here to do, then it wouldn't hold together. And so our data is also extremely helpful working towards closing those equity gaps for our Latino, Latina, and African American students. There's a lot of room to still work on it, a lot of room, but a lot better than without having that program. And I have a video, but I don't have time to show it. So I'll end with this one. So my thesis for my old-fashioned academic argument was that engagement is the key to learning. If we want to keep the students here, if we want to keep them long enough that they'll get good at this game, we have to engage them. And we're not going to engage them without empathy. We have to become better at doing empathy, and some kind of professional learning has got to be at the heart of that, and this reading apprenticeship is one example of that. I personally think that if we all read more and had more text-based conversations, the world would be a better place. And I'll leave it there.